Hi everyone, I'm Matt from Look Into Bitcoin, and today we're going to be doing a quick comparison of the previous Bitcoin bear markets to our current one, just to see how things line up and see how we may react in the following weeks and months. To do this, we'll be using a number of resources all freely available on lookintobitcoin.com, your number one source for Bitcoin information. If you haven't already, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications to ensure you're receiving all of our content as soon as it's released. So right now we're just on the BTC USD chart on the weekly here on TradingView, and as you can see, Bitcoin's had a fairly good past decade. However, we have had multiple occasions where we've had long drawn out bear cycles lasting months and years at a time. And right now we're currently in a bit of a bear cycle. As we hit over $60,000 over a year ago, we've been in a fairly continuous downside move. Now, if we just lined up this price action, we can see from the all-time high to where we bottomed out, we have been in about a 75% downwards move. Now we have moved up a little bit over the past few weeks, but nothing too outrageous. So if we actually line up the two previous bear cycles we had, the one from 2014 into 2015 when Bitcoin first surpassed $1,000 and then dipped just to a few $100, and the 2017-2018 bear cycle when Bitcoin first reached nearly $20,000 before dipping to around $3,000 or $4,000. If we line up the highest closing weeks to the lowest closing weeks of these two cycles to the current price action, we can actually see how the current bear cycle compares. So here I've just loaded up the two previous bear cycles, lining up their highest weekly close before the bear cycle commenced to our highest weekly close before this bear cycle commenced, and then we can see where they actually bottomed out with their lows. And the first thing we can notice is Bitcoin in our current cycle has actually moved fairly comparably to the downside, and it has lasted nearly as long as the previous two bear cycles. In fact, one thing we can immediately see is Bitcoin in this bear cycle actually decreased fairly substantially, a lot quicker than it did in previous cycles. So these two previous cycles have taken their highest weekly close to their lowest weekly close. And if Bitcoin has already set its low for this bear cycle, we've already set in the low over here. So this may have actually been one of the shorter bear cycles if we were to now kick off a new bull cycle. However, if not, then we could potentially see a bear cycle lasting for another few weeks, anywhere seeing through to the mid of November towards the end of the year if the previous two cycles are anything to go by. What we can actually do is load up just this little red box that I've drawn in, which actually could give us an insight into potentially where and when we could bottom if the previous two cycles are anything to go by. So if we look for this yellow one, which is the 2018 bear cycle, and line that up to a potentially price bottom of just around $20,000. We have actually already dipped beneath that. However, it could take a few more weeks or another month or two to actually line up with the time scale of that bear cycle. And then the 2015 bear cycle, where Bitcoin's price would have actually put us in percentage terms to the lowest weekly close to around $18,000, which again, we have actually already dipped beneath that with our current low. So if there's anything to really take note of with these two is that Bitcoin comparatively has actually already moved to the downside, about in line with what we'd expect when looking at the weekly closing prices. And the only other thing to really take note is that the previous two cycles actually were a little more drawn out time-wise than we have currently experienced. So maybe we're in for a few more weeks or months of sideways price action, maybe a little bit more downwards to actually line up with the previous cycles. But ultimately, this is looking a fairly decent place to load up and accumulate for the next cycle, as Bitcoin seems to be in a fairly good discounted range. The last thing to note is if we actually go on to lookintobitcoin.com and look at some on-chain data to actually see comparatively to the previous bear cycles how we actually compare in an on-chain terms rather than just a speculative price nature. As Bitcoin has grown in an asset class, sometimes looking at price alone isn't quite doing it justice to consider the scale of the market. So what we can see, looking at the net unrealized profit and loss, which gives a really good indication of where we may be in the current cycle, we can actually see that we're in the capitulation zone, and what we can actually do is draw lines between the previous cycle peaks and the previous cycle bottoms to see again that this is actually falling quite in line with the previous bear cycles. Now, as Bitcoin has matured as an asset class, the peaks aren't quite as euphoric and the lows aren't quite as catastrophic. We can see the asset class is maturing, and we can see the contraction here in the net unrealized profit and loss is accounting for this decrease in volatility and general decrease in speculative nature as the asset class grows, and generally more people are investing and trading Bitcoin daily. So just to summarize, Bitcoin's current bear cycle is actually very comparable when lining up the previous bear market cycles. If Bitcoin were to follow the length of the previous 2 bear cycles we looked at, we likely have already bottomed or will before the end of 2022. So potentially already have bottomed or sometime within the next couple months. What we can also see is, according to the market cycle, on-chain and price action charts for Bitcoin, we likely already have found a bottom in Bitcoin price or are fairly close to finding a bottom. Barring some absolute catastrophe either within Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies or in the general global markets, it's fairly safe to say that right now is a good area to potentially pick up some Bitcoin for the upcoming cycle. Please, in the comments down below, let me know what your thoughts are on the current market cycle. Do you think we have already bottomed in price? Do you think we're going to be in a bear cycle for a few more weeks and months? Or do you think that we can really start to begin the new cycle as Bitcoin starts to slowly begin to climb to higher prices? Let me know in the comments down below. I look forward to reading and replying to all of them. Don't forget, if you like this video, then please visit lookintobitcoin.com, where you can consider becoming a site subscriber to gain access to live charts, in-depth newsletters, indicator alerts, private trading view scripts, and more, all for a fraction of the standard industry price. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.